Look at me.
Shame.
Listen to me, Shay. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But what I will not tolerate is you working below your potential. It pisses me off.
You feel cold, you feel tired, you feel hungry, you feel like shit. And the weight is going back up.
사람들은 살이 찌면 운동 부족이나 식습관 관리가 원인이라고 생각합니다. 그래서 비만하면 부정적인 시선이 따라붙죠. 이 영상은 미국에서 인기를 끌었던 비만인을 대상으로 한 다이어트 프로그램입니다. 과연 다이어트를 위해 격렬한 운동을 하는 것은 필수일까요? 게으르고 많이 먹는 사람들은 모두 비만이 될까요? 미국의 저명한 신장병 학자가 지적한 다이어트의 문제점과 해결책을 살펴보겠습니다. 운동에만 의존하는 다이어트는 여러 문제를 야기할 수 있습니다.
So you can try to make up for it with more exercise, right? And that's what they pretend that you can do. So you can see at baseline there's a certain amount which is resting metabolic rate, certain amount of exercise. During the show, they burn a hell of a lot of calories as exercise. You see that they've ramped up, so your total energy expenditure is better. But when you stop exercising for 5 hours a day, then your exercise goes down. But look at what's happened to your basal metabolism. This is your resting metabolic rate. It's already gone down by week 6, okay? So don't kid yourself. This is happening all the time. But by week 30, it's gone down even more. And that's the whole problem. You get this metabolic slowdown. And because you're not burning as much energy, you don't have that, liveliness. You don't feel very good. You look at the before and after. If you look at the composition of weight loss, so at week 6 and week 30, at the end of the show is week 30, you can see that they've lost a lot of weight, right? This is 60 kilograms. And this is fat mass. So most of it is fat, right? Everybody says, oh, you're going to lose muscle, you're going to lose muscle. No, they're losing mostly fat. There's a little bit of muscle loss, but it's mostly fat. And this is their body fat percentage, and you can see it follows a pretty steady trend downwards. And the average went from 329 pounds to 202 pounds. So an amazing result, right? Body fat went from 49% to 28%. So at the end of the show, you get these great results. You have the end of the show, everybody wins. And they pretend like everything's fine, but we know that it isn't. And why not? What's the problem? It sounds like it should work, right? You keep doing what you're doing and you'll keep losing weight, but you don't. And the reason, and we've known this for at least 100 years, is that your metabolism starts to slow down. And this is what happened to the metabolism of all these contestants. And you can see in the solid bar, that's their baseline rate of metabolism before they started this. And the open circles is that afterwards. You can see that in virtually every case, these people are cutting the amount of calories they expend by a lot. Okay, so you can look at some of these dramatic examples. So this fellow, for example, starts out by burning 3,500 calories a day, and he's dropped all the way to about 1,700 calories a day. Right? And it's not just him, it's everybody. If you take the entire group of people, the average decrease in metabolism is over 700 calories a day. So if you start by burning 3,500, which is a lot, say you start at 2,000, you're going to drop down to 1,100 by the end of the show. So you wonder why you're not losing weight. Well, it's because your metabolism has slowed down so much that if you're burning 1,300 and you are eating 1,500, remember that's still a lot less than you used to eat, you're going to gain the weight back. You feel cold, you feel tired, you feel hungry, you feel like shit. And the weight is going back up. And that's the problem. It's the decrease in metabolism.
단순히 덜 먹는 것만으로 해결되지 않습니다.
The saddest part of the entire thing is that we know about this metabolic slowdown. This was shown in 1915. So we've known about it for 100 years. What I think is sad is that we give people this really horrific advice to eat less and move more. And then when they fail, we blame them for it. And that's basically you're blaming the victim. Because here's this poor fellow or poor lady who's victimized because they're suffering from obesity, from type 2 diabetes. You give them really bad advice, which you know is going to fail, because we've all done it. It fails every single time. And then when the weight goes back, you say, yeah, you should have listened to me better. You should have had more willpower. You shouldn't have eaten that bagel, or whatever it is you tell people, right? And that's really the saddest part of all, is that we try to pretend that the advice that we give is really good, and the failure lies with all of you, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? How can like 40, 50% of the population be so morally bankrupt that they let this happen to them? Is it not more logical that the advice that we gave was just really crappy?
음식과 운동 외에도 다이어트를 위해서 자신의 몸을 이해하는 것이 중요합니다.
So if you look at the Women's Health Initiative, which was a huge 50,000 person study, they reduced calories by 350 odd per day for like 7 years. And they estimated that people would lose 30 pounds. Women would lose 30 pounds per year. So in 7 years, they should have lost 210 pounds, right? Of course, that didn't happen. How much did they lose? Not even a single pound. It was ridiculous, because what happened, of course, is that their body, if you're not affecting the insulin, you can't get at that fat. You're just going to reduce your calories out. And notice here, of course, that we're not breaking any laws of thermodynamics. Calories in, calories out. Yeah, you're accounting for all the calories. But what's important is the compartmentalization of energy, right? That's what we're talking about. Not the total energy, but where it goes. Now, the reason that the calories don't work is that they operate on what I call a one compartment model. So that means they pretend that all your calories goes in to your body, and it's all the same. All your calories are the same. They're stored in one giant compartment, like this sink. And when it comes to taking out energy, it all comes out of the same thing. But the entire premise of this sort of calories in, calories out model is completely fictitious, because we know that's not what happens in the body. The body doesn't have some giant vat of calories. You can store sugar, you can store fat. Then it's not going to work. What instead is a better model is a two-compartment model. That is, there are two places in the body where you can store food. You've got your fridge and you've got your freezer. Your calories goes into your fridge, and your calories goes out from the fridge, because that's the easiest place it goes. But there's a third thing that you have to consider, and that is how much food goes back and forth between the freezer and the fridge, because that's what we're really interested in. This, the fat. But that's the one that's much harder to get to. And the question is, what's controlling this? Because that's really the key. And it turns out the main player is insulin. We know this because insulin inhibits lipolysis, right? What that means is it stops you from getting the fat coming out. That's a normal job. So normally if you eat a huge meal, your insulin is high, it's going to tell the body to move all the storage in this way. If your insulin is very high, then you can't get the food back out this way. And that's the problem. So if you have a lot of insulin resistance, for example, which keeps your insulin levels very high, it's like that freezer is kind of locked away in the basement behind a locked, steel bar. You can't get at it. So what happens now when you start reducing your calories? If you start reducing your calories in and you can't get at your storage, what your body is simply going to do is reduce the calories out. That's what it does, right? Because it's not going to keep losing weight until you die. I asked my son one time, a few years ago, how do you lose weight? He was 6 or 7 at the time. And he goes, just don't eat. So easy, right? It's like, how can you be so right about this point that has escaped like 99% of the world's doctors and dietitians? If you don't eat, you're going to lose weight. And here's the thing to understand. There's nothing wrong with it. That's the way we're built. That's the way lions are built. That's the way tigers are built. That's the way bears are built. That's the way we're built. We're built to withstand these repeated episodes where there's no food. Because back in the caveman days, there's no McDonald's. There's no refrigerator. There's nothing. There are times you're going to have nothing. That's why you have fat. If you don't eat, do you think you will lose weight? Well, yes, you will. It's not exactly a very good comeback for people to say it won't work, because it will definitely work. It will definitely work. I'm not saying it's easy, okay? That's a whole other thing. Can you do it? That's a separate question. I actually think that most people can do it. If you are able to do it, yes, you will lose weight. And what you can see that it's fairly steady. There's no kind of drop off, right? There's no drop off, that kind of dreaded weight plateau, because that's the whole problem with weight regain, is that we all plateau. These problems, right? The number one problem in the world today, right? You got heart attacks, you got cancer, you got strokes, you got diabetes, you got kidney disease, and it's all due to obesity, it's all due to diabetes. But yet, we have the ability to free ourselves from all of these modern afflictions only with the application of a technique they knew 5,000 years ago. The ancient Greeks were all about fasting, not for health. They didn't have a lot of obesity back then, but because it gave you energy, it gave you like mental focus, right? That's why they did it. And yet, with the application of this kind of ancient time-tested technique, we can break free of all this. You know, in the last century, we broke free of a lot of infectious diseases, right? Tuberculosis, pneumonia, and all this. And now all that replaced with was all these diseases. But we have the knowledge. We only have to apply it. And that's the most ironic part of all. We won't. But there's no reason why we won't. We've always been told by everybody that we have to do this. And yet, why do we not? My son knew it.